Most people think high blood pressure sends clear warning signals before it becomes dangerous. A pounding headache, chest tightness, dizziness. They're wrong. And in the 32 years I've spent as a cardiothoracic surgeon, that misconception has cost more lives than I care to count. Margaret Chen came into my operating room last spring. 67 years old, retired teacher, never smoked, walked 4 miles every morning. She did everything right according to conventional wisdom. But when I opened her chest, the damage to her arteries looked like she'd been running a marathon while dragging an anchor. Her blood pressure had been dangerously high for months without a single symptom she recognized. By the time she felt chest pain, permanent damage had already been done. Here's what nobody tells you. The warning signs of dangerously high blood pressure after 60 aren't what you think they are. They're subtle, easy to dismiss, and most people never connect them to their heart until it's too late. Today, I'm going to show you exactly what Margaret should have known and what 5 signals your body is sending right now that your blood pressure is in the danger zone. My name is Dr. Robert Hassan. I performed over 2,000 cardiovascular surgeries in 3 decades. I've held beating hearts in my hands and watched them struggle against arteries that have turned rigid and narrow. I've stood in waiting rooms and told families that the stroke or heart attack that just happened could have been prevented if someone had recognized the warning signs 6 months earlier. I've watched the same preventable patterns repeat themselves year after year. And the hardest part isn't the complexity of the surgery. It's knowing how many of these operations never needed to happen. The information exists, the science is clear, but somehow, between medical journals and your annual checkup, critical details get lost. What nobody took the time to explain is that high blood pressure after 60 operates under completely different rules than it does at 40. Your cardiovascular system after 60 is fundamentally different. Think of your arteries like garden hoses. When they're new, they're flexible. They expand when pressure increases. They absorb the force. But after decades of use, they lose that elasticity. The walls stiffen. They can't adapt anymore. So when your blood pressure spikes, instead of the vessel wall flexing to accommodate it, the force transfers directly to the organ tissue, your brain, your kidneys, your heart muscle itself. This isn't just aging. This is your margin for error shrinking to almost nothing. More than 50% of adults over 65 have stage 2 hypertension, but only half of them know it because they're waiting for the dramatic symptoms that rarely come. The body after 60 doesn't send you telegrams. It sends whispers. And if you don't know what to listen for, you miss them completely. Now let me show you what those whispers actually sound like. The first warning sign is something you've probably dismissed 100 times already. Frequent nighttime urination. 2, 3, 4 trips to the bathroom between bedtime and morning. Most people blame it on age or drinking water too close to sleep. But here's the mechanism nobody explains. When your blood pressure stays elevated throughout the night, your kidneys are forced to work overtime filtering excess fluid to try to reduce the volume load on your cardiovascular system. Your body is literally trying to lower your blood pressure by making you urinate more. It's an emergency response. The age-specific risk here is that your kidneys after 60 don't have the reserve capacity they did at 40. When they're running this hard every single night just to keep you alive, they're burning through their functional capacity. I've seen patients lose 30% of kidney function in 2 years from uncontrolled nighttime blood pressure alone. Here's what you need to understand. If you're getting up more than once per night consistently, your blood pressure is likely spiking while you sleep. Write that down. The fix here costs nothing. Track your nighttime bathroom trips for 1 week. If you're averaging more than 1 trip per night, tell your doctor you want a 24-hour ambulatory blood pressure monitor. Not a single reading in the office. A full day and night recording. That's the only way to catch what's happening at 3 in the morning. Does this sound familiar? You're not alone. Nearly every patient I've had this conversation with thought they just had a weak bladder. The second sign gets mistaken for something completely different. Occasional blurred vision or difficulty focusing your eyes, especially late in the day. You probably blamed it on screen time or needing stronger reading glasses. Stay with me. Your retina, the light-sensitive tissue at the back of your eye, has some of the smallest and most delicate blood vessels in your entire body. When your blood pressure repeatedly spikes above safe levels, those tiny vessels spasm or leak microscopic amounts of fluid. This causes temporary vision changes, blurriness, difficulty focusing, sometimes seeing small floaters or flashes. It comes and goes. That's the dangerous part. It feels minor enough to ignore. But what's happening in your retinal vessels is also happening in your brain vessels. You just can't see those. The reason this matters more after 60 is that your vascular walls have less ability to repair minor damage. Each spike leaves a permanent mark. Over time, those marks accumulate into something catastrophic. A patient named James Patterson ignored intermittent vision changes for 8 months. By the time he came to me, he'd already had a small stroke that damaged his speech center. Not enough to be immediately obvious to anyone around him, but enough that he struggled to find words mid-sentence. He thought he was tired. Here's the specific fix. If you notice vision changes more than twice in 1 week, get your blood pressure checked within 48 hours. Not next month at your scheduled appointment. Within 2 days. And when you see your doctor, ask them this exact question. Write this down. Ask them, have you checked for hypertensive retinopathy? That's the technical term for blood pressure damage to the eye. Most primary care doctors don't routinely look for it unless you specifically ask. Starting tonight, pay attention to your vision in the late afternoon and evening. That's when blood pressure typically peaks. Let me ask you something before we go further. Have you ever woken up with a dull headache that goes away after you've been vertical for 30 minutes? Most people think it's dehydration or poor sleep posture. It's not. Here's where the third warning sign hides. Morning headaches that resolve within the first hour of being awake are often caused by elevated blood pressure during sleep. When you're lying flat, your heart doesn't have to work as hard to pump blood to your brain. But if your pressure is already high, that positional change floods your brain with more blood volume than the vessels want to handle. You wake up with pressure behind your eyes or a dull ache at the base of your skull. Then you stand up, gravity redistributes the blood, and the headache fades. You forget about it completely. But your brain doesn't forget. Every time that happens, you're experiencing what we call a hypertensive surge. Over months and years, those surges are carving microscopic damage into the white matter of your brain. This is how vascular dementia begins. Not with a single catastrophic event, with 1,000 small insults that nobody connected to blood pressure. The age factor here is critical. After 60, your brain has less protective cushioning and reduced ability to clear metabolic waste during sleep. When blood pressure spikes interrupt that cleaning process night after night, cognitive decline accelerates. I can't tell you how many families I've sat with who thought memory problems were inevitable aging when the real cause was uncontrolled blood pressure destroying brain tissue one morning at a time. The question to ask your doctor: write this down. Ask them, should we check my nocturnal blood pressure and consider adjusting the timing of my medication? Most blood pressure medications are prescribed to be taken in the morning. But if your pressure spikes at night, that's the wrong timing. Your doctor can't fix what they don't know is happening. Now this next one surprises people every time. Swelling in your ankles or feet, that's worse in the evening. You've probably been told it's just fluid retention, or standing too much, or sodium. And yes, those things contribute. But here's what gets missed. Persistent lower extremity edema in someone over 60 is often the first visible sign that your heart is struggling to manage the workload that high blood pressure is creating. When your blood pressure stays elevated, your heart has to generate more force with every beat to push blood through narrowed, stiffened arteries. That constant extra work gradually weakens the heart muscle. Not enough to cause symptoms you'd recognize as heart failure. Not yet. But enough that fluid starts backing up in your venous system because the heart can't pump efficiently anymore. That fluid settles in your ankles because of gravity. You press your thumb into the swollen area, and it leaves a dent that takes seconds to refill. That's called pitting edema. It's not cosmetic. It's your cardiovascular system waving a red flag. The mechanism is this. Your heart is a pump. When you force it to pump against higher resistance for years, the muscle fibers stretch and weaken. Once that happens, reversal becomes much harder. The window to prevent permanent damage is narrow. I opened a patient's chest last year whose echocardiogram 3 years prior had been completely normal, but his blood pressure had been poorly controlled that entire time. When I saw his heart, the left ventricle wall was thickened and stiff. It had remodeled itself to handle the pressure load. But that remodeling came at a cost. His heart could no longer relax properly between beats. He now has diastolic heart failure for the rest of his life, all because ankle swelling seemed too minor to mention at doctor visits. Here's the fix. Take off your socks at the end of the day. Press your thumb into the area just above your ankle bone. Hold it for 5 seconds. If it leaves an indentation, that's significant. Do this every day for 1 week. If you see pitting edema more than 3 times in that week, call your doctor before your next scheduled visit. Tell them you need a BNP blood test and an echocardiogram. Those 2 tests will tell you whether your heart is already struggling. Don't wait for shortness of breath. By the time you're winded walking to the mailbox, the damage is advanced. Before I give you the 5th sign, I need to tell you something. And this is the hardest part to talk about because I've been on both sides of it. I've stood in operating rooms and performed miracles of modern surgery. I've bypassed blocked arteries. I've replaced damaged valves. I've restarted hearts that had stopped beating. I've sutured vessels smaller than a pencil lid. I've brought people back from the edge of death. But I've also stood in those same operating rooms and looked at damage that never needed to happen. The stiffened arteries that should have been flexible. the scarred kidney tissue that should have been healthy, the brain matter riddled with tiny silent strokes that destroyed memory and personality one microscopic injury at a time. None of it is mysterious. None of it is exotic. None of it required some rare genetic mutation or exposure to unusual toxins. It's the result of blood pressure that was too high for too long, while someone waited for a symptom dramatic enough to seem worth mentioning. And here's what breaks my heart every single time. When I walk out to the waiting room and talk to the families after surgery, they almost always say the exact same thing. We thought the tiredness was normal for his age. We thought the headaches were just stress from work. We thought the vision changes were because she needed new glasses. We thought the swelling was from sitting too much. We didn't know these things were connected to blood pressure. We didn't know it was serious. Nobody told us to pay attention to these specific signs. And they're right. Nobody did tell them. Not because doctors don't care about their patients. Not because the information doesn't exist, but because there aren't enough minutes in a standard 15-minute appointment to cover everything that actually matters. Blood pressure gets checked, a number gets recorded. If it's high, medication gets prescribed or adjusted. But the conversation about what warning signs to watch for at home, what patterns to track, what subtle changes mean your pressure is escaping control even while you're taking medication, that conversation almost never happens. So these small signals get missed. They get dismissed as normal aging. And by the time the big dramatic symptom finally arrives, the symptom that can't be ignored, I'm holding a scalpel instead of having a preventive conversation that could have changed everything. Let me tell you what happened to Margaret, the patient I mentioned at the beginning. After her surgery, we started her on a completely different blood pressure regimen. Not just medication. We taught her to monitor her pressure at home twice a day, morning and evening. We adjusted the timing of her doses so her medication peaked when her pressure spiked. We had her keep a log of every small symptom. Vision changes, morning headaches, nighttime urination, ankle swelling. Within 6 months, her pressure was controlled. Her medication load actually went down from 4 drugs to 2 because we were finally treating the pattern, not just the number. Last month, she told me something I'll never forget. She said, "I did everything I thought I was supposed to do. I saw my doctor every year. I took my medication. But nobody ever explained that the small things I was ignoring were actually the warning signs. I kept waiting for a dramatic symptom to tell me something was wrong. Why didn't anyone tell me this sooner?" That's the question that has stayed with me. Why don't we tell people what the early warnings actually look like? The 5th warning sign is one I see dismissed more than any other. Unexplained fatigue that doesn't improve with rest. You sleep 8 hours. You wake up tired. By 2 in the afternoon, you feel like you're moving through wet concrete. You think it's just getting older. Everyone tells you that fatigue is normal after 60. But here's what's actually happening. When your blood pressure is chronically elevated, your heart has to work significantly harder to pump blood through your body. That extra work requires more oxygen. But at the same time, your narrowed, stiffened arteries are delivering less oxygen to your tissues. So your heart needs more fuel, but your cardiovascular system is delivering less. The result is constant, grinding fatigue. Your body is running a deficit every single day. This isn't the tired feeling you get after a long day of activity. That's normal fatigue. This is the exhaustion that shows up even on days when you haven't done anything physically demanding. You sit down to read and fall asleep within 10 minutes. You avoid activities you used to enjoy because they feel like too much effort. You start declining social invitations because you just don't have the energy. And everyone around you, including your doctor, tells you it's age. But it's not age. It's your cardiovascular system failing to meet your body's basic oxygen demands because high blood pressure has damaged the delivery mechanism. The danger after 60 is that this type of fatigue is often written off as depression or deconditioning. You might even get prescribed an antidepressant when what you actually need is blood pressure control. I had a patient, Linda Morrison, who spent 2 years on 3 different antidepressants for fatigue. None of them helped. When we finally got her on a 24-hour blood pressure monitor, we found her pressure was spiking to dangerous levels multiple times per day. Once we controlled that, her energy returned within 6 weeks. She told me she felt like she'd lost 2 years of her life to a misdiagnosis. The specific action here is this. If you're experiencing persistent fatigue that isn't explained by poor sleep or obvious medical causes, ask your doctor to rule out blood pressure as the root cause before trying other interventions. Get your pressure checked at different times of day, morning, afternoon, and evening. A single reading at your annual physical misses the pattern. You need to see what your pressure does across a full day. Give it 2 weeks of home monitoring before you accept that tiredness is just part of aging, because most of the time, it isn't. So let me make sure you walk away from this with absolute clarity. Here are the 5 warning signs your blood pressure is dangerously high. First, frequent nighttime urination, more than once per night on a consistent basis. Second, intermittent blurred vision or difficulty focusing your eyes, especially in the late afternoon or evening hours. Third, morning headaches that fade within the first hour after you wake up and start moving. Fourth, ankle or foot swelling that gets worse as the day progresses and leaves a visible dent when you press your thumb into it. Fifth, unexplained crushing fatigue that persists even after adequate rest and isn't tied to any specific activity. Write that down. Now here's what I need you to do right now. Think carefully about the last 2 weeks of your life. Have you experienced any of these 5 warning signs I've described, even just once? If the answer is yes, you need to have a specific, detailed conversation with your doctor. Don't wait until your next annual physical. Call tomorrow. Tell them what you noticed. Ask for a 24-hour blood pressure monitor. Ask them to check for end organ damage. That means kidney function tests, an echocardiogram, and a retinal exam. These aren't exotic tests. They're standard. But they only happen if you ask. Now, I know some of you are thinking you don't want to seem difficult or demanding. I understand that reaction completely. But let me reframe this for you. Your doctor wants to help you. They went into medicine to prevent suffering, but they can't act on information they don't have. When you bring them specific observations about your body and specific questions about what might be happening, you're not being difficult. You're being a partner in your own care, and that partnership is what saves lives. If you found this information valuable, here's what I need from you. Leave a comment below and tell me which of these 5 warning signs you've experienced. Be specific. It helps other people realize they're not alone. And if you've been ignoring one of these symptoms, tell me which one and why. That feedback helps me understand what information people need most. Second, share this video with someone over the age of 60 who you care deeply about. Not because you think they're ignoring symptoms, but because this information doesn't spread the way it should. Medical knowledge shouldn't be hidden behind paywalls or technical language. It should be accessible. And sharing this video is how we make that happen. Third, if you haven't already done so, subscribe to this channel right now. I release one new video every single week on what doctors wish every senior knew before it's too late. Real information. No fluff, just the critical details that prevent the preventable. Hit the subscribe button. Turn on notifications, because the next video might be the one that changes everything for you or someone you love. One last thing before we finish. Everything I've told you today is based on peer-reviewed medical research and 3 decades of cardiovascular surgery. But I'm not your doctor. I haven't examined you. I don't know your specific medical history. So nothing in this video is personal medical advice for your individual situation. If you're experiencing any of the warning signs I described, the right next step is a conversation with your own physician who knows your full health picture. That's where diagnosis happens. That's where treatment decisions get made. What I've given you today is education. Information that helps you know what questions to ask and what symptoms deserve attention. Use it wisely. Act on it, but always in partnership with your medical team. Your heart has been working for you every single minute of every day of your life without asking for a break. It deserves your attention. It deserves your care. And it is never too late to start protecting it. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next video.